Picture standing on the edge of an unfamiliar land. No map, no guide, no guarantees, only a voice, mysterious, persistent, that says, "Go forth, Lech Lecha." As he crosses the border, he looks around. He doesn't see paradise. He sees people sweating, planting, weeding, working the soil, cultivating the land, and something clicks. Abraham doesn't choose the land of Canaan because it's empty or easy. He chooses it because it's alive. Because this is a place where something is happening, something that resonated with Abraham to the depths of his soul. 3,000 years later, other men and women make the same journey, not on camelback, but on commercial airlines. They too are answering a call, not divine, but deeply personal. They land not in a mythic Canaan, but in modern Israel. And like Abraham and Sarah, they find a country bustling, complicated, and endlessly in motion, a land and a people that deeply resonate. And yes, did I say complicated? This week on Madlik Disruptive Torah, we sit down with Noah Efron from the Promise Podcast, a progressive American who in the early 80s made Aliyah at the age of 24 with his future wife. He is founding chair of the interdisciplinary program on science technology at Bar-Ilan University. He raised a family, entered local politics, and hosts the Promise Podcast. We'll explore what it means to go forth in our generation. Welcome to Madlik. My name is Geoffrey Stern, and at Madlik we light a spark or shed some light on a Jewish text or tradition. Along with Rabbi Adam Mintz, we host Madlik Disruptive Torah on your favorite podcast platform and now on YouTube and Substack. We also publish a source sheet on Sefaria, and a link is included in the show notes. This week we read Parshat Lech Lecha. We use the narrative of Abraham's Aliyah to Canaan as an opportunity to talk with Noah Efron, a friend and a progressive American who made Aliyah, to share his story and insights. Welcome, Noah. It's great to see you.
I am so delighted to see you and to be here. Love this podcast.
Thank you so much. And I love the Promise Podcast. And I will say it again later, but if you haven't listened to it, you should listen to it. It's amazing. But am I right? I mean, you and your cadre on the Promise Podcast all kind of made Aliyah around the same time. You're all Anglos, and it really is an insight into what the experiences are of progressive American Jews, passionate as you are, and your experience in Israel. And so I think that's the weight on your shoulders today, Noah. You are representing that Aliyah. You know, there's an amazing thing on YouTube, you can find it, of when each Aliyah used to have its own name. The first Aliyah, the second Aliyah, and this has Arik Einstein and Uri Zohar is in it. And each new Aliyah looks back and at the new one coming, and of course they disparage them.
It's an excellent question. Yeah, what the fifth Aliyah was in the 1930s. So I don't know, the 25th Aliyah.
But we have to say 1984 is a long time ago. So so you definitely you're definitely part of Israeli culture.
Yes.
Okay. So we always start by looking at a few of the verses and the rabbinic commentaries and using that as a way to segue into the subject matter. So today, as I said, is Parshat Lech Lecha. And God said to Abraham, Lech Lecha ma'artzecha u'moladetecha mibeit avicha, go from your land, from your birthplace, from your father's house to the land that I will let you see. And Rashi says, Lech Lecha, for your own benefit, for your own good. And the way I take that for today's discussion is that every Lech Lecha is personal at the end of the day. And everybody who makes a migration in general, but certainly coming to Israel, it's going to be your story, Noah, that we're going to be discussing. But it is a personal journey that we all take. And he says, and in coming to this land, you will have the privilege of having children, and it is known for giving you tivacha ba'olam, your nature, your character in the world. And my guess is that your aliyah to Israel was without children. You started a family in Israel, and then I'm sure you were who you are today when you came, but certainly the experience has had an effect on who you are. And the last thing that I'll say before we get into the first question is I said before that you must have come in the 73rd Aliyah, but the point is you came as a group. I think that not different aliyot had their different characteristics. And what it does say about, Rashi says, Asher asu b'charan, and he says that Abraham and Sarai, made souls that they had made in Haran. And I take that to mean they came in a group. They were passionate. They somehow discovered themselves, made their own background. So with your permission, Noah, I'd like you to use this as a segue to really describe your story, whether it's Young Judaea, to give our listeners a sense, if you could, of your aliyah.
Well, thank you for that beautiful introduction. And it's so resonant in so many ways. What you said about children, for instance, in the end, one of the reasons why I know I'm in the place where I want to be, where I feel like I'm meant to be, is because of how beautifully my children have grown up. And I think it was Aristotle who said that you cannot tell whether a man is happy until you see how his children turned out. He wrote this in the Nicomachean Ethics, and I understand that as well. I feel that way as well, and my children have turned out beautifully, and that's how I know that I'm happy. I'd also add that another thing that's resonant is that the commandment is to, as you said, among other things, to leave the house of your father, to leave the house of your parents. And that is a very, very big part of my aliyah as well, and something that changes over time, continues to change to this day, as I every month make a trip back to the United States to see my parents, who are now in their late 90s, and measure myself as a son and as a human being in part by the distance between us. So it becomes complicated. But my Aliyah story is a very happy Aliyah story. And it starts, like you said, in Young Judaea, that I joined when, I was 12 years old, a yeshiva bacher who was looking for something beyond just religion, just shul, through which to understand my Judaism and enact my Judaism. And my older and very beloved sister had been involved in Young Judaea, and I joined that and found the people who, it turns out, are the people that I spent my life with, that I have spent my entire life with. Tonight, after we record this podcast, I have a weekly Zoom with friends that I made when I was 12, 13, 14 years old in Young Judaea. And one of them was until recently a member of the Knesset, Alon Tal. And another, my friend Bill Slott, was the maskir, the Secretary General of Kibbutz K'tura. And other friends as well. We have, it turns out, we began our lives before we were adults together, talking about what we wanted to do, what we hoped for from our lives, what we hoped for from this place. And I came with what's called a garin, which is a group of people committed to building a settlement together. And from Young Judaea, right after college, my wife was one of them, and other close friends from the movement. And we went to Kibbutz K'tura. I was 21 and my wife was 20. And when we first arrived and went into the army together, and have since, we've moved around the country and at different points in time moved around the world, but we have spent a life together in this remarkable place, seeing it change around us and being part of that change, which is one of the miraculous and extraordinary things about Israel is how given it is to being influenced by people who decide to join their life with this place. You do that, and then suddenly you have a voice, and suddenly you can make things be this way rather than that way, and you can create, as my friends and I did, your own Jewish community. It can be egalitarian. It can not have a rabbi if you don't want, and you can build a new school, as we were involved with, and you can, as I am now, get elected to city government and be in charge in Tel Aviv of environmental policy and animal rights policy and pluralism policy. You can do those things. I don't know exactly what it is about this place that makes it so amenable, that makes my friend Alon Tal somehow find his way to the Knesset because he wanted to. But it's a feature of this place. And I'm going on at great length. I just would go back to what I said about my children. There is something for someone who grew up like me, like I said, a yeshiva bachar, but very much an American football fan and a baseball fan, very much an English speaker. There's something about seeing your children toddle around, speaking their first words in Hebrew, and seeing them grow up, and the world of associations of theirs is a world of Hebrew association that pricks your heart, that's so beautiful. And also seeing them grow up very different than any American kid grows up, seeing them grow up not exactly knowing where they end and the people around them begin, being much more porous. I remember, from when the kids were in second, third, fourth grade, you'd walk into a room with a bunch of kids and they're lying all over each other on the sofa, and they're completely involved in each other's lives. And there's no such thing as a paper that you write in school that's your paper. It's always done in a group. And this idea that it's us, not me, that you see in your children in the most pedestrian ways. You see their concern for the people around them. They're feeling that who they are is a function of who they are with. It's really astonishingly beautiful and moving for someone like me.
Amazing. I'm going to jump in for a second. I must say, I did mention you recently. My grandchildren go to Camp Ramah. And my oldest grandson, Adam, is 16, and he decided to go to Young Judaea for the first month of the summer. And I said to his parents, do you know what Young Judaea is? Now, I don't know if it still has the power, but I said, you better be prepared. I think my friend Noah Efron joined Young Judaea and moved to Israel. I didn't grow up with any of that. Rabbi, were there groups around you that you had the opportunity of kind of joining? For some reason, I just wasn't in part of that.
Yeah, I mean, my world was a little different. I grew up in Washington, D.C. The Zionist world that I was part of was a B'nai Akiva world. B'nai Akiva and Camp Moshava. And it's interesting that many of the people who I grew up with also moved to Israel. I don't know, Noah, you have a direct line from Young Judaea at 12 years old. What city were you from?
I'm from the Washington area as well, from Maryland, outside of Washington, and
Did you go to Jewish day school or you went to Hebrew Academy?
No, Silver Spring. And
see, that's amazing, Jeffrey, because I went to the Hebrew Academy.
I went to
also.
the Hebrew Academy, and
on 16th Street. It sure was. I'm old. I'm a little older than you are.
But we have a WhatsApp group of my class at the Hebrew Academy, and half of us are here in Israel. In fact.
Yes, so do we, and half of my class is in Israel too. That's fantastic.
So I just really want to jump in and though say this concept of being this group, I didn't even realize when I asked the question how powerful it is. But I really do think it's amazing. It comes almost out of that Rashi where they came as a group and you've stuck together. I think that one of the other questions that I have is, and maybe I'll just give you my personal experience. If I used to walk into a Masorti synagogue in Israel, and I heard English, I would walk out because my sense was if Masorti Judaism or liberal Judaism is going to have a chance in Israel, it needs to be organic in Hebrew. And then I caught myself and I said, you wouldn't do the same thing if you walked into a Moroccan synagogue or you walked into Azerbaijan synagogue. What do we have? And so what I'd like to do now is talk about the impact of American Jews like you on the greater Israel. You know, we talk about Mizrahim, we talk about this, and certainly there's a whole bunch of, I think maybe Anglos, Americans in Yehuda and Sharon, and they have their voice. What is the voice of your cadre? Because you are, I'm not misidentifying you as a progressive American, but also very traditional Jew. And I think the cadre of people that I hear on the Promise podcast is a strong group. And when I go to your chavurah in Tel Aviv, is your voice being heard along with the other symphony of other voices in other aliyot in Israel?
It's funny that you mentioned this. I spent last night in a long Zoom meeting planning an academic conference about the 120-year relationship between American Jews and Jews in the Yishuv and how deeply interpenetrated the histories are from the very, very beginning. So that I think that American Jews have had an enormous influence here and have an enormous influence. And I used to get skittish too about hearing English in the streets and think, oh, we ought to be real Israelis. And then I had the same experience that you just described of realizing, no, what we are is an Edah. We are an ethnic group in Israel of English-speaking former Americans and Brits and Australians. In fact, in Tel Aviv today, 1 of every 40 people who live in this city is an native English speaker for one of those 3 countries between the ages of 20 and 30, which is to say we're a big, big, big group. And there are, like all ethnic groups, we have tended to concentrate in certain areas. So go to any university and, it's lousy with us. But also environmentalism in Israel. And I'm an environmentalist, and that's my political identity as well. I ran with a Green Party for city council. Environmentalism was something that was more or less brought to Israel by Americans. Also, human rights NGOs. In fact, all NGOs are things that our ethnic group brought to the country in the ways that other ethnic groups brought the things that they brought. And I think that there's an enormous amount to be proud of once you get over the feeling that somehow it's not legitimate to not speak Hebrew without an accent. Of course, once you make that psychological change yourself and you realize that it's fine for you to have an accent, you can give a speech at the city council with an accent and everyone will listen to you. Once you realize that that's fine, you start to notice that a lot of other people around you have accents too. They have Russian accents and they have Ethiopian accents.
Absolutely.
And they have Moroccan accents and all sorts of things. And that's fantastic. So I was just reading about the kibbutzim up north in the Galil in the 1950s, like kibbutz Hasolalim and kibbutz Sasa. And there are 5 or 6 kibbutzim that were predominantly American back then. And so I was just reading newspaper articles about the softball league that was so popular in the 1950s in Israel, and the American Marines, when they'd come to Haifa, would come and play against the teams of American pioneers living on kibbutzim up north. And it made me feel proud.
Talk to me a little bit about the fact that you are a traditional Jew. You teach at Bar Ilan University, but of course, what you teach is, as far as I know, philosophy of science, and you're in the what's it called?
It's in interdisciplinary studies where they
interdisciplinary studies, but you do walk a line sometimes on the Promise podcast. I think in a recent episode, one of your peers said, "Stop with the rosy-eyed look already." I mean, sometimes when maybe the Haredim are disparaged, you seem to have a sweet spot where, yes, you understand issues like the draft and things like that, but there is a sweet spot in you for maybe the institutions of the past, maybe just you seem very middle of the road, and sometimes they in the conversations you seem to have that kind of role. Is that unique? Is that something that you own? Talk to us about that for a little bit, and maybe talk about teaching at Bar Ilan.
It's funny. I don't particularly consider myself middle of the road, though I know exactly what you mean. My grandparents, my father's parents, when I was just a tiny kid, moved to Bnei Brak, and I grew up visiting them. And then when I was in the army, I stayed with them on when I had time off from the army in Bnei Brak, and really fell in love with Ultra-Orthodox society. So I have a different view than many people about the Ultra-Orthodox in particular. To me, they seem as though they offer an alternative way to understand a great many things that would be helpful for all of us to understand. For instance, the idea that study is more valuable than making money is something that, it's true, a nation could not survive if everyone decided that they were going to abandon work and study Torah or study poetry or study physics all day. I understand that, but there is something beautiful about this ideal that I think is astonishing, that I think is a great resource for all the rest of us. And the reason why I think that a view like that stands out for someone like me who votes for leftist parties and is and seeks peace with Palestinians, and the reason why it's unusual is one of the infuriating and yet still beautiful and sweeping characteristics of Israel is that we are, as a society, evisceratingly critical of everything. This is not unique to Israel. This is a Jewish characteristic as well of everything. The old joke about the woman whose boy is swept out to sea, and she raises her hands up to heaven and she says, God, please give me back my boy. I'll never complain about anything again. And then a wave comes and deposits the boy right in front of her, completely dry. And she looks up and says, he has a hat. And so this is what this country is like, where we complain about everything. It has all sorts of implications, including implications that for our international position are quite disastrous, where we are always broadcasting our flaws or each other's flaws to everyone all the time in the most immoderate ways. So it's a cultural matter that the Ultra-Orthodox, are portrayed by us to us as malingerers, and leftists are portrayed by us to us as people who are unpatriotic, and right-wing people are portrayed by us to us as messianists who have no concern over the feasibility of what they are insisting that all the rest of us do, and they're dragging us to our doom. All the time, all of our descriptions of ourselves to ourselves, and hence to the rest of the world, are so evisceratingly critical. Now, there's something wonderful about that. There's something bracing, there's something exciting, there's something, I think, morally useful about always criticizing everything. But I think that it allows some of us to forget how astonishingly successful this country is, the project of this country is. It's partly because I came from far away, because mine is a story of Lech Lecha that I do not fully ever manage to forget that. This is one of the great gifts of being an Oleh, of having a Lech Lecha story, of being an immigrant, is that you are never capable of fully forgetting how astonishing the place where you find yourself is, how surprising it is, how beautiful the beautiful things are, how profound the profound things are, because you never fully get used to them. Hebrew is, I don't have the best Hebrew, and so reading poetry for me is work, and for other people it's natural, but I don't know if it's possible for anyone to love Hebrew more than I love Hebrew. And I don't think it's possible for anyone to like scan the street, the street I live on, Ben Yehuda, and I live on Nordau, the corner of Ben Yehuda and Tel Aviv, to scan the coffee shops. And I don't think it's possible. Anyone looks at the coffee shops and thinks more than I do, my God, what a beautiful people. I don't think there's anyone who thinks that the comedy here is more surprising or funnier. And that is because I come from there and I came to here. And always I am seeing things as, I feel like quite an insider, and I'm also seeing things as through the eyes of someone who came from somewhere else. And you asked about Bar Ilan. I'll say Bar Ilan is the Orthodox, the religious university in Israel, and it is an astonishing meeting place of Ultra-Orthodox Jews and modern Orthodox Jews and completely secular Jews and Palestinians and Muslims and Christians and lesbians and just everyone that you could imagine, and everyone that you can imagine, and the day-to-day life of trying to learn something about the world, about how cells work, or about what the meaning of the Talmud is, or about how we ought to live our lives, or why society is the way that society is, in a group of people that looks like so many different people at once but have this common purpose, is this astonishing gift. So I get to bike over to Bar Ilan every week and meet this remarkably heterogeneous colloquy of people asking questions together, each of them bringing their own Lech Lecha stories to this endeavor, and you end up hearing some pretty astonishing things from these brilliant students and from my colleagues as well.
I mean, I think you're really emphasizing the Lecha part in terms of you, and I'd like to think Adam and I, when we look at the text that we look at, we discover something new, and you can't. The last thing you can do is generalize. The last thing that you can do is, talk about what rabbinic Judaism stands for when it's so multifaceted. And you do the same thing, whether it's at Bar Ilan or at a cafe. It's just a multiplicity, and that the fact that you came to it from outside, you have a special lens, and I think that's amazing. Every week I find some texts that kind of surprise me, and this week I want to share with you a beautiful text from the Bereshit Rabbah, and it says, as you recall, that Abraham was told to go to a land that God will show him. It doesn't say Canaan. So Rabbi Levi said, when Abraham was traveling through Aram Naharaim and Aram Nahor, he saw them eating, drinking, and reveling. He said, "Would that my portion not be in this land." When he reached the promontory of Tyre, he saw them, the Canaanites, engaged in weeding at the time of weeding, hoeing at the time of hoeing. They were a hard-working people, not given to merrymaking. He said, "Would that my portion be in this land." So first of all, it seems to be amazing that in the eyes of this rabbinic piece, the Palestinians, the Canaanites, the people that were in this land were actually inspirational, were talked about in flattering terms on the one hand, and the other part is the industry of the land. The startup nationness of this land is recognized in this midrash. There's so much in here, but let's talk for a second in the closing minutes that we have about what your perceptions are when you came here and now through the years, and especially through these last 2 years, of this being able to look at this land that I'm sure when you came you had certain perceptions of how it could be a shared society and certain perceptions of how we can resolve some of the big issues. Has that changed in the last 2 years? Has it changed since you've come here? And I'm asking you to say this, of course, al rega lechat.
I don't know if it's changed in these wretched last 2 years. I guess what I have gotten from these last 2 years is a fuller sense of just how vexed, how difficult the challenge is, how much pain there is for so many people, and now more than there was 2 years ago. Even what happened over the last 2 years is a product of the pain that came before. So I'm left with a greater sense of the gravity of the situation, but I think that that what hasn't changed is my confidence that that in the fullness of time, whether it's in my children's lifetime and not my lifetime, or just later in my lifetime, I think that we will reach a resolution. And I don't claim to know much about the souls of Palestinian friends, though of Palestinians, though I'm very eager and always probing my Palestinian friends to try to understand more. But what I have seen, my lifetime in Israel has been, it has a single overarching narrative now that I see from the heights of my advanced age. And what it is that since I have come to Israel, I have seen the hearts of Israelis grow softer and gentler and more open continually. And I know that this conflicts with, I know that a lot of people tell themselves the story of Israel is a story of decline, of how, at the beginning there were socialists, it was this progressive place, and then since then it's become more right-wing and more exclusive and less and more racist and less open-minded and less open to the world and less modern and less progressive. But what I have seen over the course of my lifetime is exactly the opposite. I came to a country where if you were, for instance, if you were gay, then you had no place to be public at all. I live near Independence Park here in Tel Aviv, and that was the place that was known for being the park where gay men could meet each other and surreptitiously have sex under trees in the park because there was no place to gather. I have seen the story of LGBTQ rights, or the position or the culture of these people. The acceptance of these people in Israel is a very, very dramatic story of having gone from being utterly unutterable, utterly unable to say that you exist, to one where people are just warmly accepted at Shabbat dinner by their Orthodox parents, with their husbands if they're men, or with their wives if they're women. So we've all seen that change. That's really simple. But what it is like to be Russian here, what it is like to be Ethiopian here, frankly, what it is like to be a Palestinian Israeli, also there, in every way, there is so much more acceptance. The academic year started yesterday, and 30% of the new students in the medical schools are Palestinian Israelis. It's an astonishing thing that would have been unthinkable when I came to the country. It was illegal for an Israeli to speak to a Palestinian who was not a citizen of Israel. And now the degree to which people accept one another, people value one another, if it's Mizrahim and Ashkenazim, if it's Ethiopians, if it's Russians, if it's just everyone, it has changed so dramatically. And it's hard for me to believe, Israelis are geniuses at embracing us. We're geniuses at us. We saw that on October 8th, how the entire country rose as if at once, everyone seeking ways to help everyone else. We're geniuses at us. And what I've seen in my lifetime, the story of my life, is seeing the us in this country grow and grow and grow. When I came here, it was, kibbutznikim. It was Ashkenazi kibbutznikim. And I've seen it grow to include Sfaradim and include immigrants of different sorts and include Christians and include Muslims who are citizens of the country at the very least. And I do not see any reason to expect that expanding notion of us has reached its limit. So I think that the next generation, the problem that they're going to be talking about on their podcast 35 years from now is going to be the problem of assimilation. I'm worried that my Muslim child is going to marry a Jew. I'm worried that my Jewish child is going to marry a Christian. That's going to be the problem that they're talking about on podcasts, because I think that we will by then have managed to find a way to create a bigger us, like in Breshit Rabbah, like what you were talking about, that to appreciate the people who are working hard and to understand that we all have a portion in this land.
I'll just say, first of all, thank you so much. And your perspective, I think Geoffrey will agree, your perspective here and on your podcast is, so refreshing and so broad and so, so optimistic. And I'm sure that's true in Israel. But, when we listen here in the United States from far away, it's something that, gives us an optimism that we don't always hear. And I just want to, just maybe we can close with a verse that we both learned in the Hebrew Academy on 16th Street many years ago. And that is that Abraham says at the beginning of Chaye Sarah, he defines himself as being a ger v'toshav. Means that I'm both a citizen, but I'm also, someone from a distance. And, you're describing yourself as being someone from a distance, but someone who's very much part of society. But what we just heard from you in the last few minutes is that is the society. The society is a society of ger v'toshav, of people who are there, but people who at one time didn't quite fit in, and now they fit in exactly. And you're talking about a situation where it's going to be mixed up. And that's what you said in the podcast. They'll be talking about assimilation. We won't know who the ger is and who the toshav is, and we're not going to know exactly how they merge, the two of us. So Abraham was really prophetic when he described not only himself, but the Jewish personality as being that of a ger v'toshav.
That is beautiful. I'm gesticulating wildly for those who are just listening, saying, yes, 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 that is a wonderful description and exactly what I believe. And thank you for that.
Okay, I don't want to jump in this alumni reunion here, but I do want to thank you both for being on the podcast. This was an exceptional episode. I want to encourage every listener of Madlik to listen to the Promise podcast. You get this refreshing, uplifting voice every week, and you get a front seat at the 73rd Aliyah, I'm going to call you, to the land of Israel by compatriots from America. So Shabbat Shalom. Thanks for joining us, Noah.